Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. I am JayBee and of course with me is Milly.
Hi.
We have Sophie.
Hey.
And joining us as our very special guest today is Becks Wallace. Thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure.
So I'm really looking forward to getting into all of your Scooby Doo projects and of course the origins of your career as well, going back to the start. So of course doing my due diligence, I went on IMDb and was really interested to see that your first listed credit was as an animation intern. So I wanted to know what your kind of path was like to get to that stage.
Okay. So for me, I guess my animation career goes back to like 2009, so it's been a while. Um, in high school, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I actually wanted to go into like science for a while, and then I'm like, oh, I don't like school. Like this is very stressful. But I really loved art. I've always loved art. I've always loved drawing. And then I think it was my last year or two of school, I found online this internship, and it's the Hanna-Barbera scholarship. I found it like on a forum, like it was like a big secret. No one knew what it was, but I'm like, I guess shot in the dark, I'll apply for it and see what happens. And sure enough, it was a Warner Brothers scholarship. And I had to do like a portfolio and an essay. And I had an interview. It was really cool because the interview was with Spike Brandt, Tony Cervoni, and Bruce Timm. So I had this interview with them, and it went really well. And later that night, I got the phone call that was like, "Hey, you got the scholarship," and I'm like, "Oh my God!" And I dropped my phone, and it broke. So I had to put it back together and call them back, and it was fine. Um, but the scholarship was 4 internships, so 4 summers in between college. I went to school in Chicago, Illinois, in the US. And then every summer I had to fly to California and I would work at Warner Brothers. And so I was an intern on 3 projects. 2 of them were Tom and Jerry. It was Tom and Jerry meet Sherlock Holmes, and then Tom and Jerry and it's like Jack and the Beanstalk. I can't remember exactly. I think. And then the last 2 were for the Looney Tunes show. So I just did that between college and it was so much fun. I got to meet a lot of people and I got to kind of be familiar with the process so that when I started my career officially, I guess in 2014, I was like, I want to do boards, and I got into boards. So Wow, that's amazing. And come across like an internship like that as well. I mean, a lot of our audience, have an interest in pursuing, a career in things like animation. And so to that end, do you have any advice for people that are looking for internships and going through the application process as well? Oh, good question. Because a lot of animation internships are kind of hard to come by. That's why I got really lucky. But definitely just keep looking, keep searching. And I think that your best bet would be to look at anybody who's already part of the Animation Guild or the Animation Union, local 839. There's a lot of resources through that website that has like internship applications. You can talk to other people. There's a lot of seminars or like videos, just a lot of outreach. So that would be my recommendation for the first thing you should do. But after that, just look at different colleges. There's a lot of really good colleges. I'm only familiar with the US, but there's a lot of good ones that can at least give you some sort of idea of what you should be looking for, or what are good internships, because sometimes they're not great internships. But that's more like logistical. The big one for me though is like start drawing. Like I know some people, especially in 3D, are like, oh, I'm just gonna work on the computer. It's like, no, you should know how to draw. So work on your drawing skills, and you don't have to be perfect. So I really want people to remember that, like, I'm not the best draftsman. I wasn't the best draftsman, but I was kind of a jack of all trades. I had an understanding of different types of art, and for me, since I wanted to go into story, I focused on storyboards. So that's the other thing. Kind of get familiar with what you want to do. And in animation, it's usually like storyboards, design, backgrounds, props. Get familiar with what you want to do early on, and start focusing on that as best as you can. That's all I got.
That was great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Expanding on that, what were some of the lessons that you learned during that internship that you feel has stayed with you the longest?
Oh, I gotta dig way back for that. Honestly, being curious, and being proactive with talking to people. Because as an intern, at least on my end, I had a lot of downtime. I was either drawing in my downtime, or I would try to like, I'm gonna organize files, but you can only organize files for so long before you're like, okay. But the big thing that I would do is I would go to all of the people who are working, and if they had like a free moment, I would be like, how are you? What do you do? And just getting to know people and asking questions and being polite and being personable. Because that's, I think, especially the longer you get into your career, it really is who you know. It is your network. So for me, just meeting a lot of people, I still talk to a lot of these people too. And I've ended up over the years, I've worked with them. And that's my biggest recommendation. Just talk to people, get to know people. And that's what I still carry that with me. I still try to make friends with people. It's a little harder with remote, but just being nice and asking people what they do and how they are, like, people remember that. So
that is amazing and a really valuable information there. So thank you so much for sharing. Because as Milly said, like a lot of our audience here are people that, you know, dream about going into the animation business. And a lot of those people, without a doubt, will have been inspired to do that by watching Scooby Doo projects. And you've got such a great history with the Scooby franchise, you know, for instance, Be Cool Scooby Doo, Scoob, The Haunted High Rise. So before all of those credits, how familiar were you with the Scooby Doo franchise?
very, very familiar. Although it's funny because like I didn't grow up with Scooby as much as a lot of other people did. I was more like, I was like Powerpuff Girls, Looney Tunes, a lot of Nickelodeon shows. But I always watched, it was always on, so I did always watch Scooby Doo, and it was fun. But I didn't really get into it until it was my job. So I started on Be Cool in 2014. And when I got the job, I'm like, oh, I should watch some Scooby Doo, get really familiar with it. So I watched a lot of it. Although my favorites are Zombie Island, Witch's Ghost. Those are my favorites. I also really love the live action movies. I love Matthew Lillard and all that, who ended up actually being our Shaggy on Be Cool. But yeah, I got really familiar with that. But it was interesting, at least for Be Cool, because we kind of took a lot of the characters in a very different direction. So like I learned all this stuff, and then I got on the show and they're like, forget about it. Forget about what you learned. Because this is kind of the direction we're going. Like Daphne was a lot goofier, and Velma was still nerdy, but a lot more assertive. Like, yeah, I had to just kind of go with the flow and learn how we did that show. And then I did that for 2 years, and then I did a bunch of other stuff, and then I got into Scoob, and then that was more like, we're going back a little bit to the past. I'm like, okay. So that was like just kind of understanding how the characters work more than anything. Like the lore isn't as important, because every time we brought in characters from the past, like in Be Cool, it was just a slightly different take. So it was just kind of just being like flexible and adaptable to that. And so like when I was on Scoob, it's pretty traditional. At least the characters were pretty much what we all know them as, with a little bit of an update. But that meant that by the time I got on Haunted High Rise, it was like, you know the characters, you've been on this, like, you know how it goes, just do what you think is best. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, I was pretty familiar with that. But like I said, more than anything, really familiar with how the characters are and how they work and who they are and their relationships with each other. So
That's incredible. That's such a testament to both your adaptability, but also the diversity of the Scooby-Doo characters, because it's like not two versions of them are the same. So Daphne in Be Cool Scooby Doo would be quite different to Daphne in Scoob, and so it's really interesting to see how different people have interpreted the characters over time. But either through working on Scooby-Doo, like the various iterations, or your knowledge of it from the past, has there been a member of Mystery Inc. that you feel resonates with you like the most?
Definitely a Velma girl. I've always been a Velma girl. Somewhere floating around, there's a Halloween costume of me in Velma. And my now husband was dressed as Shaggy. It's really cute. I wish maybe I can send it to you or something.
Oh yeah,
But
we can like add that in the background. That'd be amazing.
it's cute. It was a lot of fun. But it was always Velma. But then what was so funny though is when I did both Be Cool and Scoob, I really found myself liking Fred. Like I didn't expect that because a lot of people are like, "Oh, Fred's boring," but I don't necessarily agree. And in Be Cool, like he was a lot of fun. He was like grounded and realistic, but like goofy as well. Because everybody was goofy and Be Cool. And then in Scoob, he's played by Zac Efron, and I'm like, cool. And that just I don't know, it just kind of fit that kind of like he's kind of a dude, and he's a little, they kind of portrayed him as not so smart, but that doesn't really matter. I don't think he's not smart. He's just cool. He's chill. And I don't know, like I ended up doing so much with Fred in both of those shows that I'm just like, huh, I guess I like him a lot too. So it was always like Velma and Fred. I love Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne as well, but I don't know, they resonated with me a lot. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, I can see why. And I think especially because, because you worked on Be Cool, that was certainly, I feel like this series where the characters like Velma, Daphne, and Fred finally got more of a story arc than they ever had before. It was finally we see more personality from them because always the focus had been so prominently Shaggy and Scooby. So I guess for this series Be Cool, how did like working on that come about? How did you become involved with it?
So when I had my 4 internships. My last internship was in 2012. And I had a producer on that. His name was Wade Wazinski. And I worked with him for 2 or 3 internships, definitely 2. But I stayed in contact with him. And so 2012 and then 2013 goes by. I graduated college. And then I had to get like a job that wasn't art related because I needed a job. But he called me, I think. He either emailed me or called me sometime early 2014, so maybe like January. And he called and he's like, do you want to do a test for the show for Be Cool Scooby Doo? And I'm like, yeah, of course I do. I'm like, well, cool, let's do a storyboard test. When do you need it? And he's like, oh, whenever. And I'm like, okay. So I tried to get it done as best as I could, pretty quickly. By this point in time, this was March, and then tragically my father passed while I was working on the test. It's okay, it's fine. But I'm like, oh no, I can't finish this test. So I emailed Wade and I'm like, I told him what happened. He was like, take your time, don't worry about it, like do finish it though. So I had to go through a little period, but then I finished my test and I sent it in, and within a week he's like, we'd like to have you on board. And I'm like, yay. So it all worked out. It was a tough year, but it was really nice, like especially with such a difficult time, to get this really cool thing. And so in May 2014, I moved to California and I started this job. And I was really surprised because I skipped the storyboard revisionist step. A lot of the times in storyboards, you start as a revision, or you start in revisions, you move on to boards, but I skipped that, just went straight to boards. And I'm like, oh, okay. I will say I was probably wasn't quite ready to start boards yet, but I kept working. And it was a tough show. It was actually a pretty tough show, especially like because this is my first gig ever. It's Scooby-Doo's a lot. There's a lot of characters more than anything. Like I think you have the 5 at all given times, and then you've got the bad guy, and then you have the red herrings, and then like if if you haven't even like expanded episode, you might have 10, 15 characters. So it's a lot to take on. And it was just also such a straight, like a totally different direction. So like I said earlier, I came into it like, oh, this is what Scooby Doo is. And then my bosses were like, no, this is not, we're not doing that. We're doing this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I had to be really flexible. And I had to work really hard, put in a lot of hours, a lot of time. And I did that. I was on Be Cool for almost the entire show. But yeah, it was tough, but tough for somebody who's brand new. And I learned a lot. I still carry a lot of what I learned, mostly just like technical stuff, but like that was where I learned how to run really fast. And I've been running since then.
I mean, I imagine it'd be quite tough for anybody because, like you say, with Scooby, there's so many characters. It's not just like you've got your one main character, but also because it's so kind of pre-established as well, you've got a fan base that kind of expects original Scooby. You've got the producers saying we're taking this in an entirely new direction. Was there any kind of level of pressure for you knowing that it was such a well-established project, or is it like you said, your first projects were things like Tom and Jerry and Looney Tunes are already well established? Is it something you were quite used to?
Honestly, actually at that point I was kind of used to it, because I will say with like Tom and Jerry, the pressure wasn't as hard on, like, or as heavy as it was like on even Looney Tunes, because with Tom and Jerry I think people are just more flexible with like, everybody has a different idea of Tom and Jerry, but it's pretty much the same. It's like cat and mouse, they fight each other. That's the whole thing. So it wasn't so bad there. And I actually think they were pretty well received at the time. But when I was working on the Looney Tunes show, there was a lot of stuff online. A lot of people had very strong opinions about how they were portrayed and what they looked like. I think Bugs Bunny at one point in time was like mauve. He was like a pinky color, and a lot of people didn't like that. I actually had a really interesting lunch with Spike and Tony. And I asked them, I'm like, how do you feel about this stuff? Because they've also been working with Looney Tunes forever, at least most of my life. And they're like, here's the thing. Who's Daffy Duck to you? And I kind of gave them my little thing, and they're like, okay, cool. But in these episodes, Daffy was like this. And other people will take that on and say that that's Daffy. And really what they were kind of getting to was that everybody has a different perception of who these characters are. Everybody has a different interpretation of these characters, whether they think about it or not. Sometimes you agree, but often people don't. And that it's okay. Like that's fine, because the Scooby that you want, or the Daffy you want, or Bugs Bunny that you want still exists, and you can watch that. And newer versions may resonate with other people that don't resonate with you. And that's great, because at the end of the day, you're all Scooby fans. Like, isn't that what you want? Everybody's all Looney Tunes fans. Even if it's like, again, you have a different interpretation. Someone may love Be Cool, but not necessarily resonate with the original. And that's great. So for me, when I started Be Cool, I remember when it came out, or at least when the first images came out, they're like, a lot of people were like, oh, it looks like Family Guy. It doesn't. There's actually, if you look at the Scooby that's in Family Guy, looks very different from Be Cool. If you put them next to each other, totally different. And I remember just laughing them, just like, and even if it did look like Family Guy, who cares? Like, why are people bothered? I never understood it. But it turned out fine. And the thing is, it's also just people's opinions on the internet at the end of the day, not to say that all of them are invalid or anything, but a lot of times it's just some person on Twitter. Like, it's just some person on Reddit. It doesn't matter. I mean, I can also say in a kind of a sassy way, I'm like, well, I got paid. I went home, so I paid rent. I don't know.
Well, you mentioned that you obviously worked on 3 different types of Scooby projects, all very different. You also brought up, the different iterations and what we, think somebody looks like. You just touched on the character designs of Be Cool Scooby Doo. being different from like other iterations of Scooby-Doo, but your website shows that these designs were even reflected in the storyboards. How important was it to be true to Be Cool's design at this stage?
This is the same for a lot of shows. So especially for TV, we have this concept of on model. So they want you, when we draw on the boards, like they want us to be as close to the model as possible, because when our boards are shipped off to the overseas studios, which I think in that case was, I think there was one in the Philippines and maybe one in Korea, I can't remember. But we want to have the characters as close to model so that they can animate it as accurately as possible. Because if like a character's face is too different, or the big one is their body shapes. If their body shapes are too off, then when we get the animation back, you know, this is exaggerating, this never happened, but you could have like Fred and then like Scooby. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Unless that's the perspective, whatever. But traditionally you do want to be as close to the model as possible. It's a little different in feature, especially Scoob. In Scoob, we didn't have to draw on model because very few people can draw perfectly like what you see in the 3D animated movie. But again, as long as like the proportions are right and your expressions are good and they're as close to the model as possible, yeah, you have to do that. It's just kind of a technical thing that we have to do.
I mean, that's super interesting. I always like wondered, like, does a storyboard need to be like dead on for it to go into like the final render? So yeah, that's really awesome. Do you recall how long it would usually take to storyboard an episode of Be Cool Scooby Doo?
Good question, because it kind of varied. Our first few episodes, we actually reworked them quite a bit. But generally it was about 5 weeks, at least for my end, because the animation pipeline, generally it's, you know, without going too far into it, it's like you get the script goes to boards goes into edit, and during the edit phase you'll get revisions, and then they ship that overseas to animate. And that's a really truncated pipeline, but for us as the board artists, we'd get about 5 weeks, sometimes 6 if we were fudging the deadlines a little. But yeah, so it was 5 weeks, and we had 3 board artists, so we'd each get about a third of each episode. And it's hard to say, like, if we broke it down into even sequences, some sequences could take a day and some sequences could take a week. Anything that's super actiony may have taken a little bit more time, and certainly anything with 10 characters versus 2 is going to take a lot longer. But I'd say like about 5 weeks, yeah.
Oh, that is just incredible. It's really cool to get an insight to Be Cool Scooby Doo, because it definitely is such an incredible show. Like, whenever I'm feeling low, it's like any episode really that you can think of. If you had like a dartboard and you threw it at a particular episode and just decided that that's what you'd play, it's so good at like kind of being uplifting and stuff. So in terms of all like the roster of different episodes, is there a particular episode that comes to your mind, or a particular sequence that you worked on that stands out to you being as really memorable?
Oh, I have a few. I would actually say, so my favorite episode, I think, is just called Halloween. And that's with the Baba Yaga witch. Love that episode. I loved it, and I did a lot of work on that one. Because I remember when we got it, I'm like, it's a Halloween episode, and that's my favorite. I love Halloween. I love all that, and it was our team. And I remember telling my director, I'm like, I want everything, but obviously I couldn't have everything. But I'm like, I want these scenes, and he was like, go for it. I know you're gonna kill it. And I'm like, yay. So if I'm not mistaken, I did the cold open. What's really special about the cold open, by the way, Easter egg. So that episode starts off with like it's an overhead of a neighborhood, and then like a panning shot of a couple houses, and then there's some kids who knock on the door, and there's a guy who hands out candy. So that scene is based on my hometown.
Oh.
And that block those are the houses that I lived in, or like that I lived in the first house, and then my neighbor, and the character who opens the door and hands out candy was based on my dad. So that was super, super special. So
Oh,
that's probably like really that's probably like my number one favorite one. And then I also did so much. Like I think I did the callback that's kind of rendered like old lithographs. I did that. And then I did the the final confrontation with the Baba Yaga when Daphne and Velma raise from the leaves and they go and they finally get the witch. Like that was all me. I loved it. But so there's that episode, super special to me. My other favorite one though was the cold open for I think it was Into the Mouth of Madcap, and that's with the clown guy. I think I have the board somewhere, but like I remember doing that and I was saying, I'm like, I think this is the scariest one I've done, and it's pretty spooky. And I watched it not too long ago, and I'm like, well, that is scary. And I like all the scary, spooky stuff. I did so many cold opens for the show. I'd have to look at a list and tell you all of them, but the cold opens were my favorite because I got to flex like my spooky, scary skills, and I haven't really got a chance to do much of that since then. So
that's incredible. Definitely like 100%. I don't think I could watch the Halloween episode now in the same light. That is just such an awesome bit of background and a great tribute as well. And so you've probably already answered my next question in that regard. But do you have a favorite memory, maybe besides that stands out to you from working on Be Cool Scooby Doo?
oh, so many. Like I said, those are my first 2 real years in animation. I think I don't remember which one it's called. It's the episode with the caveman and ice. I actually wrote the cold open. That was one of those rare times where the original script that we had, it wasn't quite working. And so they're like, Becks, you just go try and do this. And I'm like, okay, because I'd never actually written anything for the show before. And I'm gonna tell you, it's terrible. Like the whole scene is just puns, and I came up with really silly puns. But I remember that it went in, and when they were like, "Oh, we animated all of it," I'm like, "You kept most of it, yay!" So that was really memorable for me. And I felt like, cool. I don't think I got any writing credit, but it doesn't matter. Like whatever. But that was a lot of fun. And I think, oh man, I guess if we want to talk about behind the scenes stuff, I know at one point we were in a building and you do weird things behind the scenes when you're at work because you get bored and you work long hours and everybody's like delirious from working too much. I remember at one point I bought a little mini pool table, and so periodically throughout the week people would come in and just this little tiny, it was like maybe like 2 foot by 1 foot, just a little pool table. People would come in and shoot pool and then like go about their business. So that was really fun. And gosh, what else? There's a lot. A lot of late nights just hanging out with my coworkers. We got tacos quite a bit. So just like memories like that. And I still have friends that I still talk to, like to this day. It's been, oh God, almost a decade, almost 10 years. I still talk to a lot of them. So
wow, that's amazing. And like you say, it's 2 years, it's a long time that you're all, working together. And I guess kind of the next project, Scooby project that you're listed on IMDb for, been Scoob. And speaking of things taking a few years, it's kind of our understanding that was in production for, quite some years. So at what point were you brought in on that project, and how long did kind of the work that you do take?
oh boy. I can't remember math exactly with it, but I want to say it had already been in production for maybe 2 to 4 years before I came on. And it had gone through several different iterations before that point. So I came on in 2018. That sounds right. In 2018. And at that point in time, I think Dax Shepard was on it before, and he had just left. So I came on. They're like, you came on in the after Dax era, so post Dax. And at that point in time, they were really trying to figure out the story. And I remember my first assignment was Shaggy make Scooby a sandwich. And I was like, oh, this is cute. This is very traditional. And I worked on that for maybe like 3-4 months, which is so different from Be Cool, where you do a whole episode in a month. But for this, I was reworking Shaggy makes Scooby a sandwich over and over and over and over again. And it was just such a bizarre experience. I've never been on something like that. I'm just like, do you like this? And they're like, yeah, we love it. We're just trying to find out the story. Like, that's the big thing with feature. And this is how it was with Scoob, was we're making a movie. And I would say with a movie, the stakes are a lot higher. And, with Be Cool, it's like, well, there's probably going to be people's opinions online, whatever. But with Scoob, it's like, no, this is an international movie. This is a big deal. So we have to get it just right. And what was really interesting, though, was a lot of movies, really, you're trying to impress your first audience, and the first audience are the executives. And the executives have their opinion of Scooby. But not just that, we're trying to appeal to the whole globe. So what does Scooby mean for the whole world? I can't even tell you that. I still can't tell you that. So yeah, working on Scoob was very, very different, totally different animal. The characters are pretty similar, but to answer your question, I think I answered it. Very different experience, I'll say that.
And ultimately, I think, the time was well spent because, like you said, it was about understanding the characters, what the world wanted to see. And honestly, in terms of just a tribute to how much people actually love Shaggy and Scooby, I don't think I've spoken to a single person that didn't get emotional towards the end. So it certainly achieved its goal. And in relation to kind of the work that you were doing on that, IMDb says story artist, where we normally see storyboard artist. Is there an abbreviation on their part, or is it that, there was a different role?
Oh, I think it's just a technical term. Because I think like story artist has maybe like a more highbrow kind of feel to it. I will say maybe it's because we did get to do a lot of reworking with the story. There was a little bit more freedom to try a different take on this scene, that maybe the writers were like, well, here's what you have, but if it doesn't work, try something. Which is kind of, I did that with that, like I said, the episode on Be Cool, but that's rare in TV. It just kind of happened. I got lucky, but in feature, you do a lot of reworking on your end, and you work very closely with the writers and your director. Not totally different from feature, or from TV, but yeah, I think maybe you do a little bit more work. But generally it's really not that different, to be honest. So yeah.
What aspects of Scoob did you work on?
Oh boy. So I'm not sure if you are familiar with one of the last iterations. I'm trying to figure out if I'm allowed to say too much, but well, I'll say this. So I was on Scoob for 2 years, roughly. My whole first year was a totally different story. We had a whole lot of characters that ended up not showing up in the movie at all. We had Jabberjaw, we had Grape Ape, we had somebody else. Those are the two I remember, but I did a lot of work with those characters. And then when we finished that, we turned in one of our animatics, went home for Christmas, and I came back and they're like, so we cut Grape Ape and Jabberjaw from the movie. And I'm like, a lot of that was mine. And they're like, yeah. So a lot of what I had done that first year ended up getting cut. I do think that I think at least one of those showed up in the featurettes. I was really surprised. But yeah, a lot of what I'd done the first year didn't make it. But the second year was when stuff that I'd done did show up in the movie. Oh gosh. I do think I did the final, maybe I did the final iteration of Shaggy Makes Scooby a Sandwich, because that does happen. And a lot of the later sequences. I think the two big ones are when Blue, Falcon, and Dynamite talk during the big battle at the end. I know it's been so long, so forgive me if I'm not getting the details totally right, but Blue Falcon wants to call his dad, or he's like, he doesn't feel good about himself, and then Dynamite's like, you're Blue Falcon, you could do this, you're great. I did that scene, and I did that a lot. I did many versions of that scene. I think I even wrote my own version of that. It didn't make that's not what made it into the movie, but I did that one. But I think my favorite scene is Fred when he puts on his ascot. That was my scene. I did a lot of the stuff in the battle, like a lot of the Cerberus running through. I think there's, again, if it's in the movie, cool. If it's not, I totally forgot. But Cerberus is chasing Shaggy and Scooby back and forth. Like I did a lot of that. So yeah, that Fred with his ascot is my favorite. That was my favorite scene to do, because I think for a while we didn't have the ascot, and then at one point we're like, I think we need the ascot, and I'm like, that's my scene, I'll do that. So I did this big silly thing, and like he has the grease paint and the Scooby shield. Like I had so much fun. That was my favorite thing to do.
Amazing. I think we can all say that's one of our favorite scenes as well.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think you've answered my next question, so I'll pass it to JayBee.
Yeah, it's so incredible to hear about all like the different versions, because I know when we spoke with Sandro Cluzo, he mentioned that Atamant was going to be in it and Penelope Pitstop. So it was like crazy to think about how it would have been quite like almost like an Avengers style movie at one point. It's absolutely
that's what they wanted.
amazing.
Yeah.
And perfectly fitting as well, given that it was, on like the big screen and everything. It was intended to be on the big screen, and so obviously, stuff didn't quite work out with all the things that were going on in the world. But I know that when restrictions did start to ease up, there were certain screenings that did happen across like the world. Did you ever get a chance to see Scoob on the big screen at all?
No, unfortunately. I will say that was kind of a bummer, because we were really excited about it coming out, and this is really my first feature experience, my first movie I got to be on. And so, to be told that it's going to be just dropped on the internet, I'm like, okay. Like, but I understood. And of course, it was the better thing we needed to do. We did have a big Zoom premiere party kind of thing, which was fun. Still a little bit of a bummer, but I never got to see it on the screen. But it kind of, at this point, it doesn't matter for me, because to see how the movie was still well received and people still saw it. And I still have people to this day, they're like, you worked on the Scoob movie? And I'm like, yeah, you saw it. Like, did you like it? And they're like, yeah, it's great. And like, really, I learned like that's all that matters, is that people got to see it, people enjoyed it. And it's like the premiere party is just one thing, seeing in the theater. I think eventually I will. I think it'll happen. There's always new screenings, or if I really want to, I can find a friend who's got a projector. I'm like, we could just do that. And that's more personal anyway. It's more fun to like just get somewhere with your friends and watch this movie. So I never did get to see it on the screen, but I think maybe someday. And if I don't, that's okay. I'll probably work on another movie and see that in the theater, and that's okay.
Yeah, like fingers crossed, because I know that sometimes they do put like movies back in the cinema for like anniversary events and stuff. So, I mean, it is so weird to say. I can't even recall if we're at the stage yet, but we mustn't be too far off the 5th-year anniversary of Scoob at this point. So it's kind of weird to say.
Don't say that, JayBee. That makes me feel really old. I remember going to see that with you.
Well, Well, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there one day. But I guess that leads on to almost that was a question in two parts. Is what's your reaction or response to seeing some of the sequences that you've storyboarded, kind of taken to that animation stage?
I love when I finally get to see it animated, because as a board artist, you just spend so much time looking at your black and white drawings. And truthfully, a lot of times you get sick of it. You're like, oh, I don't want to see this anymore. I just want to see it alive. And I mean, with boards, it is alive, but it's just, it doesn't hit right. It doesn't hit the same. And for animation, you wait so long to see boards to animation. Like I said, truly long enough that you forget what you did. And so when you finally see it animated, you're like, oh, look how pretty, like, look how great, it's so much, yes, like, I was so excited. So it's totally a treat. It's so much fun. It just feels like it takes forever to get to that point, but maybe that's the thing. It's like you don't get instant gratification. It's like long term, and then when you finally get it, you're like, yeah, it's great, love it.
That's incredible. And here's like a curiosity that I had on my end, because of course you mentioned that you worked on Haunted High Rise, and that kind of got my gears turning a bit, because it was so weird. Were you so used to it being a situation where when someone worked on Scoob, they then transitioned to Holiday Haunt, and when someone worked on Haunted High Rise, quite often they worked on Trick or Treat Scooby Doo. So what was your kind of stage of getting onto that process of working on Haunted High Rise, and like was Holiday Haunt ever something that you were interested in at the time or anything like that?
So I didn't work on Holiday Haunt or Trick or Treat, because after Scoob, I moved to Titmouse, and I was working on like Bless the Hearts and a bunch of TV shows, totally different from Scooby. But at that point in time, I got promoted to director. So my focus was directing for a while, and I love directing too. But so I missed Holiday Haunt, even though a lot of the people from Scoob are on that too. I haven't spoken with Michael Krinsky in a while, but I know he was directing it. I do talk to, I think he was head of story at the time, was John Dusenberry. And I know a lot of those people they were on it. And then Trick or Treat was happening while I was still working on Bless the Hearts. But one of my friends, his name's Cole Rothaker, was an assistant production manager on Trick or Treat. And I don't remember who it was, but I think it was him. I think he was like, hey, we're going to have another Scooby project, but the Hex Girls are going to be in it. And I went, what? I was like, oh my God. So I got so excited. I'm like, so I'm going to work on this, right? And he's like, I already put your name in. I'm like, thank you. And so the timing just worked out. I finished Bless the Hearts in like 2021, maybe like April or May or something like that. I want to say probably April. And then Haunted High Rise was going to start boards in May. And I'm like, perfect. And I had my interview with Audie and Carolyn, and that went really well. And I told them, like, hey, I'm a big fan of Hex Girls. Please just let me do this. Basically, I was like, please just let me work on this. And they were like, okay. So I came on when they had already actually started boards a little bit at that point when I started, but yeah, it divine intervention, I don't know, it just kind of worked out. But yeah, that's what happened.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that our reaction to the Hex Girls was very much the same as yours. We were in an environment like this, we were doing an interview with somebody, and they just said it, and I think we were all kind of looking at each other, just trying not to scream in this person's face. We were all so excited, so I can completely understand why, like you said, when you heard that, you were like, I want to work on it, and I want to be part of the Hex Girls. So what did your role entail on Haunted High Rise?
So I got to do their introduction into the movie. So I don't remember what sequence number or anything, but it's when they get to the hotel and they're like, we're gonna go meet the Hex Girls, and they're like, that's your first assignment. I'm like, oh, I was so excited. So I got to do that, and then directly after that scene is their first music video, so I got to do that one.
Oh, wow.
And I feel like there's another sequence in there somewhere, but those were the ones that I'm like, so somebody up there was very nice to me. Audie or Carolyn, both of them were like, sure, she could have this. And I loved it. I loved doing that. And what was really cool about this one is that, you know, how I said like on Scoob, you're working the same sequence over and over and over and over again. I felt like when I did the Hex Girls, I showed them my first sequence and they're like, looks great, make it pretty. And I'm like, really? They're like, yeah, a couple changes here, but looks great. And I'm like, yeah, no notes, basically. And it's always a good feeling as a board artist because that makes it feels like you nailed it. And so I did that first assignment. The pipeline was a little weird because they didn't really give us much of a deadline. They're like, maybe 2-3 weeks per sequence or something like that. I don't know, but they weren't really, it kind of felt like feature a little bit in that regard. But I did that first sequence and that was pretty fast. The music video though took forever. Like I didn't even finish cleaning it up, like making it super pretty because it was just a big scene and lots of shots. And I have a cat who wants to jump up here. She might make up here. But yeah, I love doing those scenes and I love that music video. There's so much love into it. I wish I could show it to people.
We wish we could do. I can't believe how much we wanted to see this, and that this is the movie that I think the theory of and the kind of premise of we've been most excited about of all the Scooby movies in the last 10 years, and it's the one that we can't see, and that genuinely hurts. But we did get to see a few sequences that have been showcased, which is the outside of the legendary hotel. There's a flashback sequence to the Hex Girls at Oakhaven, which again, just hearing the name Oakhaven was so exciting. So I don't know if you saw which ones had, you know, been kind of showcased, but do you kind of remember working on any of those? I know you said you kind of were part of the Hex Girl introduction bit.
Maybe. So you said that there was like a flashback. That was in my music video. There was a flashback to Oakhaven, but it's so fast. What was the context of it? Do you remember?
Oh, so the premise about that was the Hex Girls, it was a flashback to Oakhaven, and they were going into a record store to presumably buy the record that would inspire them to you know, form their band.
That is my sequence. I did do that.
Oh, wow.
It's very brief. And I think I don't know. I don't want to overstep like Mary Hoffman's role, but I feel like I did come up with the little girls' designs. I think I came with their little ones. But it's such a brief moment where they run into this record store, come out and they have the Come Back Johnny Warlock's album. And then I think the next scene is them like rocking out in their room. I love that little scene. Yeah, that should have been in the music video.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, I think we're all like speechless, like anything to do with Hex Girls, we're like there. I mean, when the news broke about this movie and the Hex Girls being in it, I mean, fans were super hyped about it. You've given away so much already, but in terms of the Hex Girls themselves, were they more true to their original forms like in the 90s, or as it's more of a Guess Who style, was it a take on the Guess Who episode?
Character-wise, I think they're pretty much the same. But design-wise, very different because they were going for more of like a glam rock kind of style, and I loved it. It was so cool. Like, because I think both Guess Who and then Witches Ghost were pretty similar, if I remember correctly. But ours was, they looked like their characters, but they were a very different take, and I thought it was fun. I thought it was cool. Mary did a great job designing them.
I just, you know, like you said, it's one of the movies that we wish that, as a big fan of Scooby-Doo, was the one that we were really looking forward to. Like, especially the movies that we've got recently, like this premise seemed to be the one for me. Like the Hex Girls, like all of them. We were unfortunately informed by Carolyn Blair that the movie was shelved, but this sparked a surge of fan support for media coverage. What was your response to this support?
When I saw the news come out that, well, first of all, I had already known it was canceled for a while now. I want to say I think I found out in maybe the summer that it was, I don't remember exactly, but because last year was crazy when I found out it was a lot going on with my life personally, but I was really sad. I was really disappointed. I actually can't really understate like how badly I felt about it, because it was Hex Girls. I'm like, no, everything I did in that was like a labor of love, and I was so upset. But when I saw people responding to it, I'm like, yeah. I felt validated. I felt like vindicated. That cat. Sweetheart. I felt like really vindicated that I'm like, people want to see this, because when I found out the news that it was canceled or that it was shelved, I'm like, this is a mistake. This is a mistake. I'm like, you guys do not understand. Like, I wish I wasn't at Warner, but I really wish I could go tell somebody, I'm like, this is a big mistake, because you're going to make so much money if you do this, if you just finish it. Because I remember during the show when we were working on it, the Funko Pops came out. Sweetheart. The Funko Pops had come out, and I think they sold out in like a day, something like that. And to me, I'm like, that's a testament. People want this. People love Hex Girls. Like, they want more, so let's give it to them. And so to hear it got shelved, it's a mistake, and it's still a mistake. So
Yeah, definitely agreed. Because it's so weird. There's been some instances where I almost feel a bit like the Undertaker of these movies in a way, because we interviewed Michael Krinsky like literally 5 days before that news broke, and that was big at the time. But I don't want to diminish obviously the love for Holiday Haunt, because it definitely is there. There's still definitely a need for that movie, but it was on a different level when everything happened with Haunted High Rise. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, the notifications were kind of going crazy. It really did spark a huge surge, not only within the Scooby, fandom, but worldwide as well, with, Looper, Screen Rant, Collider, all these, outlets getting involved. So is there kind of anything additionally that you can share about Holiday Haunt that will kind of get Scooby fans quite, I guess, behind the idea of the movie at all?
like I said, I'm not sure. I don't know too much about Holiday Haunt, except I know that they finished it.
Oh, sorry, I mean Haunted High Rise. I'm like confusing.
But
I'm getting my
that's
lines
okay.
crossed.
That's okay. Well, I have friends on Holiday Haunt, so, and I think we found out the news like the same week, something like that. So I remember when I found out with Tony, and I call him Dudes, when I found out that Holiday Haunt was canceled, I'm like, are you guys okay? And they're like, no. And then like a week later, I found out about Haunted High Rise, and they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, no. But that Haunted High Rise was gonna be wild. It was like, how do I describe it? I mean, I will say first and foremost, if you wanted Hex Girls, you got Hex Girls. It was so juicy, so much good Hex Girls stuff. And the story was so much fun and just so different. It was a really interesting take for Scooby, because I think I did see Carolyn's interview, so I think she did mention how Daphne's whole character was just tired and just over it, which was a really kind of a fun take for Daphne. Because I got used to seeing her so optimistic in Be Cool, and then in Scoob, she's like really cool. It's Amanda Seyfried, so like nice. That was wonderful. But then to see her totally different, I'm like, character range, nice. So I was really excited about that. And then the big thing is Velma is a big fangirl of the Hex Girls, and I did a lot of that in my scene. Like their introduction in the music video was just Velma like, oh, and I'm like, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
But it was so fun, and the designs were really cool, and Johnny Warlock he's such a cool bad guy. And I think people would have, I'm like, I can already see the cosplay. Like, I think people really, really liked him. But yeah, it was such a fun movie. And I do think I did see the whole thing at one point. Because we had to watch it in acts. So we watched it Act 1, that was finished, Act 2, it was finished, Act 3 was finished. I do know that there's the full animatic somewhere. I don't have it, but think somebody does. So it's like there's a movie that exists, it's just in board form, but I almost wish that we could just watch that at least.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, a million percent, a million percent.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I mean, I don't have a lot of hope that it will actually get finished, unfortunately. But I do feel like there will be another Hex Girls project. I think especially people's response to it, to Haunted High Rise being canceled. It doesn't mean that there isn't a world where, you know, there is just another version of this movie that gets created. It's the Haunted Cruise. I don't know, you know, like they may find a way to like refinagle it into a different type of movie, but the same kind of feeling. And I do think I did hear rumors that, because this is actually, I heard rumors about this with Holiday Haunt, is that they were trying to find a different place to distribute it that wasn't like streaming. And there was kind of a rumor that maybe that will happen with Haunted High Rise, but Haunted High Rise, I don't even think they started animating it yet. Whereas Holiday Haunt is finished. So I think it might be a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think, you know, maybe this movie, it may not work out. I don't think it's going to work out, but that doesn't mean we won't get Hex Girls in the future. So, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, like there's always a new Scooby. Every year there's a new Scooby. So only a matter of time.
Yeah, like I was so like hoping that maybe the whole kind of resurgence would change their mind, because with it being quite Halloween centric, like there's an opportunity for that every year realistically. So I don't know, you know, it's how things work behind the scenes. Like I don't pretend to be an expert about any of that, like, you know, because I don't know anything about all that behind the scenes. So fingers crossed, but without a shadow of a doubt, I think people really are looking for Hex Girls content, because as you said, the Funko Pops sold out. And honestly, if someone like were to come on here, even in Zoom form, and just run us through the whole movie entirely, I think that would be like, people are so in love with the idea of Haunted High Rise, like even that in and of itself, I think would do incredibly well. So definitely is a movie that we're fingers crossed, hoping that things like more stuff comes out. But I guess that's all the, you know, the Scooby related questions that I had, you know, for you today. So I'll pass on to Milly to kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, so are there any upcoming projects you have at the minute that you can talk about?
Well, it's not Scooby related, but I just finished on a show called The Hospital. Like I said, very different from Scooby. It's a sci-fi alien show that's kind of like Grey's Anatomy. But it stars a couple of like, it's basically the cast of this space hospital, that there's a lot of like drama, and it's really weird, and the sci-fi, it's like I've never seen stuff like this before. The production designer is Robin Eisenberg. She's on Instagram. You can find her work. It's just gorgeous. And it stars Kiki Palmer, and Maya Rudolph, Natasha Lyonne, Stephanie from Everything Everywhere All at Once, Kieran Culkin. It's an amazing cast, and it was a wild show to work on, but it's going to be on Amazon Prime, I think, next year. But please watch it, because we worked so hard on it. And yeah, it's not Scooby, but like if you like sci-fi and you like aliens and you like queer storylines, like it's great, and I highly recommend it. And that's my plug.
No, that does sound absolutely amazing. And where's the best place for people to keep up with your work? Is it kind of social media? Do you have a website? Is it IMDb? Just kind of list everything.
IMDb is probably good to see what I've worked on. I have an Instagram. It's Becks Wallace Art. I rarely post though. I'm kind of a ghost online, unfortunately. But I do try to keep it up when I can. Anytime I start a new project, I do usually mention it. Or I usually do post something on it. And I will say there is a couple Hex Girl drawings on there. I probably shouldn't have posted them, but nobody knows, right?
I was about to go onto
you know?
Instagram and realize that I should probably wait till the end of the interview.
Yes. But I mean, there's like 3 drawings, and they're not boards. No, they're not boards at all.
I mean, that's definitely quite the way to wrap things up. And Just thank you so much for your time today, because you've been extraordinarily generous with it, and of course your patience with us working out the scheduling. So thank you so much for all the time you've given us today, and all the amazing stories that you've shared with your career on Scooby Doo as well. So we definitely really do appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. And this was a lot of fun, and I'm always happy to share as much as I can. So maybe more off camera, but thank you. This was
100%.
great. I had a lot of fun, and there will always be more Scooby. That's all I got to say. There's always going to be more Scooby. There will be Hex Girls again in the future. I just know it. So never fret, Scooby fandom. Like, we got it. It'll happen.
Definitely reassuring words that will mean a lot to the Scooby community, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. So I guess for the purpose of wrapping up the video, Sophie, where can people find you online?
You can find me Instagram at Scooby for life.
Thank you so much. And of course, you can find our link tree in the description as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching another interview. If you do want to see more, then please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.